Today, we're talking about navigating challenges with emotional eating,
Not many of us make the connection between eating and our feelings.
the power of small wins,
Those small wins, they allow us to focus on progress, not perfection. And so when you break down your big goals into small, manageable tasks, we're able to make that steady progress.
how a registered dietitian can help you attain your health goals on your health journey,
Together, we develop the skills that they need to manage moving forward.
and the difference between a nutritionist and a registered dietitian.
All dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians.
You're watching the Healthier and Happier podcast. People are trying to reach their health goals, trying to come up with ways that they can become healthier. It can be very difficult for them. So how do you feel like a dietitian can really help someone reach their health goals?
Good question. So dietitians are health professionals. They have expertise in nutrition and the human diet, extensive training in medical nutrition therapy and counseling. They help promote health, prevent disease. They can help to shape dietary choices for both healthy and sick individuals. And most importantly, they take all of that knowledge and expertise and they tailor it. So it's all focused on an individual and that individual's health goals.
That's really good information there. And I think that's very helpful for people to know and how a dietitian can really get in there and support them. People are getting frustrated or discouraged because they're not getting to where they want to be. They've tried, they've run into barriers, whether it be trying to wake up early and they can't do it, or they're trying to eat healthier and it's just hard because either life's getting in the way, work's getting in the way, or anything like that. And they're not really sure how to navigate it. How would you handle as a dietitian someone's coming to you discouraged and they're kind of like halfway through their goals and they just can't seem to just make it work?
I like to understand why. Why are they frustrated? Why do they want this particular goal? And so I really encourage folks to self-evaluate. We talk about what are the techniques they've used to manage or cope so far. Have they been successful? Why haven't they been successful? And then really just trying to connect with where are they? What do they know to be true? What have been their experiences? And then together we develop the skills that they need to manage moving forward, creating those small wins that turn into larger wins that build confidence and success.
Yeah, so you said something there that really resonates with me. So when I see patients as well, and I think this is very important as a health professional is also helping them attain their goals, but looking at like small obtainable goals, right? Like, so the small wins. The small goals are so important and so helpful because they can do it in little bite-sized pieces. You know, they always say like, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like one bite at a time, right? So it's very similar for that when people are trying to achieve their goals and trying to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to go for, by doing it small goals at a time, because they really do make a huge difference in the long run. I've had patients come to me and been like, I want to lose like 30 pounds in like 4 months. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that, right? How can we break that up into smaller goals? And because when you start to put yourself out there and start to create these big goals in such a timely fashion, sometimes you can be setting yourself up for failure in a way because you're constantly aiming for that weight goal. And if you're not seeing the progress there, so quickly can you just throw your hands up and be like, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm done here. Because it's not happening the way you want it to.
Yeah. Well, and I tell everybody when we kind of sit down together, some of the things that we work on, especially right off the bat, they're going to be like, what? Does this even make sense? Right?
Yeah, right.
Because it's such a small couple of goals because I want them to get their first wins in, right?
Yeah.
You can't go from not working out every week to hitting 20 minutes at the gym 5 days a week. How about we start with 1 or 2, right? I want you to be able to come back to me and say, I got this.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yes.
And if you went overboard, awesome. But if you didn't, you know, because people come back and they're like, oh, well, I only got to the gym once this week. I was like, that's great. That was our goal. Like, why are we disappointed? You did
Congratulations.
it. That's one more day than you did last week.
Right. Absolutely. No, it's so true though. It's part of why I love being a dietitian too. When you get into that light bulb moment or that happy moment with the patient when they're just like, oh, I did do it.
That's my favorite part.
This wasn't so hard. I think sometimes getting to that point with patients can be difficult too, because a lot of patients, just people in general, don't know much about dietitians, right? You know, they think of dietitians and they're not really sure what that is. They know that they're a health professional, but what they can do with that health professional, they're not really sure. I've had tons of people come to me and be like, so this is going to be my first time with a dietitian. What should I expect? And I love that question. And I want people to continue to ask that question. I think it's important to feel safe and comfortable asking your health provider, this is my first time. What should I expect? It's just going to help you feel more at ease when you meet with them. And so, I think one of the big things is when we have people come to us and talk to us, it's also about, trying to build that rapport and trust with them so they can open up. How would you go about building rapport and trust with patients, and especially those people who are trying to navigate health goals?
Honestly, I tell everybody right off the bat, right, that I take this relationship, I want them to kind of view it the same way that they would a therapist, because I firmly believe that every health professional, doctor, dietitian, and therapist, you need to be comfortable with them.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm not offended because you're not going to make the progress with me if you're not comfortable with me. I tell them too that, just to kind of set and manage expectations, I want them to ask questions. They're welcome to ask questions of me, to challenge me, because I don't know everything that they've been through. And then the other expectation that I set is, just like with any healthcare professional, I need you to be honest with me. But I ask a lot of questions. I love getting to know my patients. And I also understand that there needs to be trust in this relationship, and trust is earned, right? So just because I'm a dietitian and a healthcare professional and you sign a HIPAA form, doesn't mean that I automatically have your trust. And so if I ask you a question and you're not comfortable answering it, I ask them to please just tell me that. And maybe they'll feel comfortable 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, we'll get there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it certainly depends on what we're working with in that particular relationship, but it's a safe space, and I let them know that I want to earn their trust.
It's so true. You're not going to feel comfortable with someone if you just don't jive with them. If you feel like things are not lining up and it's just they're not listening, or you feel like they're not listening, or they're not hearing you, let them know that. And then if it's still not working, then it's okay to go find someone else, someone that is going to work with you and support you with what you're trying to accomplish. That's very important with all your health professionals, as you said. I think you really need to find that trust and that confidence in the health professional you're seeing, dietitian, doctor, whatever. Also, with what you said about trust, I think, that is the forefront to a successful professional relationship with your patient. And, if you don't have that, you can't expect to be reaching their goals or that they're going to move forward. And I don't mean to say this to be crass or mean or anything like that, but it's just a waste of the person's time and the health professional's time, because you guys aren't going anywhere. You're just spinning your wheels. Yeah. So,
and we genuinely want them to reach their goals, right?
Absolutely.
So if I'm not your cup of tea, or if you don't trust me for any reason, I don't know, I'm a little crazy, right? It is what it is. If you feel I'm a little it's fine. There are so many amazing dietitians out there.
Yeah.
And you'll find someone. I'm happy to help you find someone.
Absolutely. I don't think people know that enough. I think when people go see a healthcare professional, I feel that, and I could be very wrong on this, but I feel like they are not the ones in the driving seat or the driver's seat. And what I mean by that is you are enlisting this person to be your healthcare provider. And you are driving this, right? You are being an advocate for your health and your wellness. So if the person is not listening to you or hearing you, you need to tell them and you need to be upfront with them. Don't be afraid of them. Healthcare professional typically gets into the healthcare field because they want to help people. And if you don't tell them what's going on or what's worrying you, what you're nervous about, what you're frustrated about, if you don't tell them these things, they can't help you and they can't help navigate that situation.
Yes.
So it's so important.
I'm sure you've seen that, right? Like there are so many.
All the time.
Like I hear all the time stories, especially with doctors, unfortunately. And I mean, we love doctors, right? But especially when they have in the hospital setting, people rushing through nonstop. And I know definitely in my clinical rotation, I remember just constantly walking in to see patients and I saw people just rushing through and the patients were so overwhelmed and they didn't feel heard. They're not retaining anything. And I get it. It's a hospital setting, right? A little bit different, but it's just already such a stressful experience. And I just never want my patients or my clients to feel that way. And so, for me, it's slowing down and they take the driver's seat. I listen. I want to hear what they have to say. Genuinely, I care what they think more than any lab value or number on a scale. And they should expect that from every healthcare professional relationship that they have.
Well said. I mean, very well said. When you were in your clinical setting, how many times did you run into a patient's room and you're like, "Hi, I'm the registered dietitian," and they look at you and be like, "Who?
Where's my lunch?"
Or yes, right. Are you bringing my food?
This one was disgusting. I was like, okay, that's food service. I will let them know your feedback. Thank you so much. Right. Can we instead discuss this?
So in talking about registered dietitians, so we have, so to kind of give people a little bit of a background. So registered dietitians have the credentials of RD, RDN, or LDN. So those abbreviations are registered dietitian nutritionist, and licensed dietitian nutritionist.
Correct.
That's a lot of abbreviations that we get to use. Elaborate a little bit for me on what those mean. Is one better than the other? And how does that even kind of work? And why do we add nutritionist at the end of registered dietitian?
I'll start there. The addition of nutritionist to the RD credential was actually intended to encompass this broader concept of health and wellness, in addition to, the prevention and treatment of conditions. So the distinction highlights that all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. But ultimately, everyone who earns the credential of registered dietitian can choose to use registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist. But then RD and RDN refer to the national credentials, standards for education and experience. LDN, or licensed dietitian nutritionist, which in some states is actually just LD, licensed dietitian. That refers to licensure in a state. So many states, but not all, require that they have laws requiring licensure before one can practice dietetics. In states that don't require licensure, there's actually very little regulation over the use of the term nutritionist. And so no third-party verification for qualifications, education, experience.
So just because someone's an RD or an RDN doesn't make them not as good as an LDN. It's not like they had to go for different tracks or different schooling or anything like that.
In states that have licensure laws, they will require that you already have the RD credential.
Yeah, I think it's important to make that distinction because I have had people come up to me or call me and ask so are you a licensed dietitian or a registered dietitian? I'm like, well, I'm both. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And it's just kind of explaining that point to them that it doesn't really matter whether they're an RD, an RDN, or LDN.
I've lived in a few different states at this point, as you know.
Yes.
And quite a few. I will say that if you don't have to be an RD, at least from what I know in my experience, if you don't have to be an RD to be an LDN, you at least have to have the same amount of education and experience in some other way, shape, or form that is then verified third party by the state before you're allowed to practice.
Yeah, so it's really interesting when people come up and say, well, are you a nutritionist? And this is kind of a debate sometimes where, and it maybe debate's a strong word to use, but I know some people wonder, like, what's the difference between a nutritionist and an RD? Why aren't you just called a nutritionist if you're a registered dietitian nutritionist?
So remember how I said that all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians?
Yes.
A dietitian, to earn those credentials of RD or RDN, they actually have to complete, at this point, a graduate degree in the study of dietetics at an accredited school. They have to complete a minimum of 1,200 hours, I think, right?
Sounds about right.
And supervised practice through a dietetic internship and pass a national exam. They're specially trained and authorized to provide medical nutrition therapy. On the contrary, nutritionists, they're just folks that provide advice on diet and nutrition to other individuals. It's very generic. Some states may have restrictions, like I mentioned, on terms and use of the title nutritionist, but for the most part, the title nutritionist is not a protected title in the United States. And so anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, regardless of whether they've had any training or experience in the area.
That's always good to know.
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring this up, because I think it's important to empower the public and educate the public and help them to understand that there is a difference and distinction. Your next door neighbor could call themselves a nutritionist and not have any training. They could have loads of training by just doing lots of coursework online. They could take a nutrition certification course if they wanted to, but it's not the same as an RT. Something that is also important to kind of check in with is insurance, right? So at MJD Nutrition, we take insurance.
Absolutely.
Right? So do you know if nutritionists, anyone who calls themselves a nutritionist, can they take insurance?
No.
Okay. And see that, and that's important distinction to make. As registered dietitians, we can accept insurance, but we can also choose not to accept insurance. It's really dependent on the private practice and
really
what they want to do.
Process to go through, as you know, Matt. So,
yes.
For those dietitians that choose not to, I kind of don't blame them.
Yes, right.
But in general, absolutely, I think that's part of why we have licensure laws too, right? Tying back is it's meant to protect vulnerable populations. I would not want someone, a loved one, to go get healthcare advice about their diet if they have chronic kidney disease or cancer from Joe Schmo off the internet who's claiming to be a nutritionist but doesn't know jack.
Yeah.
And so the licensure laws, those states that have them, it's intended to protect vulnerable populations. And in the same way, insurance companies, as much of a pain in the butt as they can sometimes be, they're trying to do the same. So they will only cover medical nutrition therapy. And that means those of us that are educated and experienced enough to provide it.
Yeah. And I think you raise a good point there too. This also kind of ties back when we were talking about, talk with your healthcare provider, because you might see a dietitian that's covered under your insurance, but they may not focus in the area that you specifically need to be seen for. Right. So that is something that is also very important too, is to ask that question. Be like, hey, do you have experience seeing people with X issue? We have a lot of people call in and set up appointments with us beforehand because they want to know these things. They want to know, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Have you ever seen other patients with the same issue? We will let them know right then and there whether we have or we haven't. And I think that's very, very important, especially for people to do. Because not only do you need to jive with your healthcare provider and you need to be able to feel comfortable with them, you also need to know that they know how to work with you, with your disease state or whatever you're dealing with. I think that's very important because we all have specialties and we all have focus areas. I know you have a focus area here with eating disorder patients. So, we all have our focus areas. And I think it's important that the public be very aware of that. And as much as I would say that we can see everything, which as dietitians, we're trained to see a lot of different things.
Yeah.
There are areas that we as healthcare providers particularly enjoy working with or prefer to work with because we just have an interest in that area.
I think you're right. It's, you can liken it to doctors, right?
Yeah.
I think for the most part, yes, we can all be general practitioners. And for the most part, I would consider myself one as well. But we also tend to have little niche areas, whether it's the patients we typically see or the ones that we're, like you mentioned, most interested in. Diabetes, right? Like there's so much to know, and that's constantly coming out. That you want somebody that's well versed in that versus somebody who's maybe seen a handful of cases.
Right. It is very, very important. What's your story? Like, what made you want to become a registered dietitian? And then on the follow-up with that, we had just mentioned that, your kind of interest area with MJD Nutrition is to work with eating disorder patients. Maybe elaborate why that is kind of a focus point for you.
Okay, so I'm probably an anomaly. But I didn't realize dietitian was a job. Did you know dietitian was a job when you were growing up?
I did not. No.
I had no idea. I even took a class in college that focused on food in various aspects of life. And I had still no concept. And I think it was just a lot of little things that like poked and prodded me here. I actually spent my first decade, I'm a second career dietitian in clinical research administration. And I just kind of started like participating in studies because being a subject in a study is fun. And I was reading these studies.
I agree.
Right? For fun. So like, it was fun.
It is fun.
And then I found I was reading more and more of the like nutrition and health ones just for fun. And like, who reads research studies for fun? That's a little weird. And so it just like more and more, I was like, oh. And then I met a friend of mine that had been in the class that Eats 101 class that I took in college. And she's a dietitian in the research realm. And I was like, holy cannoli, what is this? And so I started thinking about it and the wheels were turning. And ultimately, I think the kicker was I was training for a 50 miler. And
50 miler.
Yeah.
50.
50. Oh. I will say I've not completed an ultra in any way, shape, or form. It was the first one I was trying for, and I have not tried one since. I was mostly half and full marathons. But I got a stress fracture in both femoral heads, right? So the upper part of your legs. And the orthopedic surgeon at Duke, I was working at Duke at the time, was like, I've never seen one in anyone so young. Like, this is way more than just overuse. And it kind of went down the rabbit hole of, you can't overly restrict in general, and you sure as heck can't overly restrict food intake while you're training for an ultra marathon of any kind. Light bulbs go off. You start learning more and more. Had to see a dietitian myself for just a short bit. At that point, I was like, why can't the healthcare system be more preventative medicine? Because if I'd known this, I wouldn't have ended up in the orthopedic surgeon's office,
With stress fractures.
With stress fractures in my femoral heads.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah.
Oof.
I think between that, you mentioned eating disorders. I think between that experience, just having to kind of face some of my own disordered eating patterns, and two, when I was in graduate school, I'm sure you did too, Matt. Like you get really, really close with the people you're in graduate school with, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I learned that there were so many that I dealt with an eating disorder or disordered eating habits. And it like another light bulb, right? Like, how are there so many people dealing with this? And we never talk about it. And how are we not giving people more help rather than having to try to figure this out on our own?
It's so true, though, with the eating disorder community that it's very underserved, and it's a tough area. Can you elaborate a little bit about how the population is underserved? I think it's important to get that out in the open. I think people should be aware of that, and I think I know there's never enough help for those individuals, and I'm glad that that's an area that you're interested in and focused in. So talk a little bit for me about what it looks like for the eating disorder community and how underserved they are.
I mean, there's research, but the research is not frequently updated, and certainly it isn't without its flaws. So I think the most recent statistics I saw were from 2021. About 4% of adolescents have an eating disorder. 9% of the US population will have an eating disorder at some point in their lifetime. Then there's data like from 2000 to 2006, the prevalence rate was 3.5%, jump
Wow.
like a little over a decade. 2013 to 2018, and the prevalence rate was 7.8%. So it more than doubled.
Wow.
And so then statisticians, not me, have estimated that if we can anticipate the percentage of people that by the time they get to 40 in the US will have an eating disorder at some point in their life, right now we're looking at 35% of the population. So the different perspective, the risk is 1 in 7 males and 1 in 5 females by the age of 40 will have an eating disorder.
You said there potentially, if things track continuously as they
it's
are
increasing.
now,
Yeah.
like 35%.
What's worse is that number is going to be lower than actual rates because, again, the statistics are not without their flaws, right?
Of course.
So
it's hard to get everything.
Yeah. Well, we've learned that people of color are only half as likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder. And of course, it's very, like our data is very gender binary. So for anyone who considers themselves non-binary or in the trans populations, they're not included in our data. And those folks absolutely have a high prevalence as well.
Yeah.
So we're learning. We're trying. I've seen some early data.
That is super heavy. Think about where it can go. And there's just not enough help out there for individuals who are struggling with this. And that's just mind blowing. That data is just mind blowing. And it's kind of scary if we don't have enough help out there. Because I don't know much about eating disorders because, like you said, we don't really learn much about that in our schooling. At least I didn't. I mean, you learn about it, but you don't go into like great detail. And it's such a unique area within the field of dietetics that either it gets overlooked, unfortunately, or people just tend to not go in that direction. So I think, it's very, very, very interesting. Thank you for kind of giving me those data points. I didn't know it was that much. Gosh. So kind of continuing on with that, you've been doing a kind of intensive boot camp with eating disorders. Maybe you can share some knowledge that you've learned from the boot camp and some things that, have really kind of caught your eye that you didn't know beforehand or anything like that.
Oh my gosh, Matt, what haven't I learned? As you mentioned, we don't we don't learn much in our classes, in our coursework.
We don't.
We learn kind of what the DSM-5 criteria are for diagnostics, which are not without their flaws either. You just don't learn that much. There are so many common co-occurring conditions, right? Like I had no idea. It totally makes sense when you learn it. The common co-occurring conditions and the multiple diagnoses. Also in school, I don't know about you guys, but they really just focused on one therapeutic like counseling modality, right? Motivational interviewing. And while it's fabulous, there are so many therapeutic modalities that are available. And so I'm like learning kind of about a lot of them, learning which ones I'm most comfortable with and that I think are going to serve my patients the best. And kind of delving a little bit more into those, learning how to incorporate them. But really like the best stuff from this course, and it will probably not be my last because I just want to learn all the things. It's the best way. That's why we do continuing education, right? We want to keep learning so as to stay on top of things, but also to continue to serve our patients and clients the best. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's like all encompassing.
Yeah, I like that.
But it feels so fitting. I don't know where I first heard that, but it's so fitting for this population. So just kind of learning the sticky stuff, like how to dig in and do the work with them and meeting them where they are.
No, that's great. I'm glad you're taking that boot camp. I think it's awesome to stay on top of the most recent knowledge and the most recent research. We do the best we can. Research is coming out like nonstop every day, and you're just trying to stay on top of it is hard. It's really hard, but we do the best we can. And things like boot camps, like the one you're doing, can really kind of streamline the important stuff and get you to know what you need to know to kind of help your population that you're working with. I can only imagine that emotional eating has come up a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
How would you approach someone or work with someone if they came to you and they were frustrated because they were kind of probably emotionally eating, and how much can that like derail their goals? Talk to me a little bit about that and what your thoughts are about how to handle emotional eating and what you might suggest.
Well, first off, I have to let them know that they're not alone, right? Like you mentioned.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And not many of us make the connection between eating and our feelings, right? So understanding what drives emotional eating can help people to take the steps to change it. We turn to food when we're stressed out, lonely, sad, anxious, angry, bored. And those little daily stresses, they can cause us to seek comfort or distraction. But the most important thing is that we learn emotional eating patterns. And so while it's not easy to unlearn them, it's entirely possible.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I always tell my kids this: if you need help, ask for it. I think that's what we're talking about here, right? Like, you've got counselors and therapists that can help you deal with your feelings. You've got dietitians that can help you identify the eating patterns and get you back on track. You've got even fitness professionals who can get your body's feel-good hormones, chemicals moving and firing instead of food. Like, get it done through exercise. So there's so many professionals out there that are willing and able to help.
We can learn and be aware of these behaviors, right? It's all behavioral, right? So we can, if we stay aware of what we're doing, and we sometimes take a step back, and this is by no means very easy to do. Like, this takes practice. You have to practice this. This just doesn't come like that. By you just trying to be aware of what you're doing can be very, very, very helpful. And being able to just take a step back and asking the question, is this helping me reach my goals? It sounds very easy for me to say what I'm saying, but it takes a lot of practice. And a lot of it mainly is due to we tend to focus on other things in life. We have a lot of stuff going on in our lives. We have stressors in our life, and our focus doesn't go straight to, oh, what am I eating? What am I paying attention to? It goes to, I want that food because that's going to make me feel good. So I'm going to eat that. It can be very easy for you to kind of slip up in that way and go and move in that direction. Before people know it, they're like, well, did I just eat that whole bag? Oh God. That's probably not what I wanted to do. And then they get discouraged and then they get upset. And, one thing you said as well is that you are not alone. Happened to me. Definitely happened to me. And, I'm not perfect. And it still happens to me from time to time, but there are times that I can catch myself. And I think something to help people is, you don't have to be perfect with your goals. I think that is also very important. It is okay to not be perfect. Yeah. In fact, I think usually perfection typically sets you up for failure because you're just trying to do this like all or none thing, right? As if you either do it all or you just don't do it at all. That's not really how life works. So it's very, very gray. And there are going to be times that you're going to be great at it, and there are going to be times that you're not so great at it. And that is okay. That is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, and the thing is too, Matt, that like, that's not fun either. Like, life is meant to be enjoyed, right? So
absolutely.
Even with diabetic patients, it's like, you can still go to a birthday party and celebrate. Let's just create strategies to make it safe and healthy for you to do so.
Yeah.
But I still want you to go and enjoy life.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it is so true, right? So one of the things that we do is we tell our patients that we have to choose something that you're going to enjoy. We have to choose something that's also going to work for you. Yeah. So we do the best we can to kind of meet in the middle of what we can do to get you where you want to be, but also that you enjoy and that you find sustainable.
Yes.
And I think that's very important, is finding when you're setting up goals and you're aiming for things to accomplish, sustainability is so important. And that's why when you talked about earlier, the small goals, so helpful, because these large goals, sometimes, if not all the time, are not sustainable. So I think it's very, very important to bring that up. And I'm glad you brought that up too. We have to find something that works for you as a patient and a person, as well as making sure that you're happy with the direction you're going in. It is so helpful to hear the patients say, or people say when they talk with you or and I'm sure with other healthcare professionals, like, oh, I thought this had to be much harder, when it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
I hear a lot be like, I thought you were going to tell me I had to cut out X, Y, and Z.
Right.
No, that's what you did that got you here.
That's right.
Like frustrated in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Things like fad diets, which will cause people to do that. It'll cause them to severely restrict, and they'll lose weight. But then what happens is they gain the weight all back because they go off the diet and they start eating whatever they want. And it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. Emotional eating can derail people, but it can be worked on. And I think it can be very helpful to speak with your healthcare provider if that is something you're struggling with. And like you said, there are therapists, counselors, and other people like that can really help you work through those things. We as dietitians can help you work through that too. But again, it's all about finding someone you trust and someone you're comfortable with. That's very, very important. There's emotional eating, and then there's also mindful eating. So that word's been thrown around, spectrum, right? Which is right. Yes, this is opposite end of the spectrum, which we've already somewhat talked about mindful eating. What's the difference?
So mindful eating is an approach to food that focuses on an individual's self-awareness of the food and their experience of the food. It's things like thinking about whether you're hungry or you're eating because of emotions. Appreciating, when you sit down to a meal, the time, the energy, the resources that went into the making of the meal. Eating slowly, taking the time to enjoy the flavors, and then ending the meal when you're satisfied and not overly stuffed. And it can be an incredibly useful practice in attaining health and nutrition goals. And it can help specifically to free you from those unhealthy habits around food and eating. But it also does things like promote better digestion and keep you full with less food.
Yes.
So it has other little benefits that we're learning.
Which is really, really helpful, especially when you're feeling full from the food that you're eating and not like overstuffing yourself. So there's always that, like, if you eat too fast, it takes time for the signals to kind of hit and for your body to be like, oh, by the way, we're full. Okay, thank you very much. We're done here. And if you eat really fast, you don't notice that you're full until it's a little too late. And then you're like, oh man, I overate. Oh, I don't feel good. I know we've all been there. We all felt like things like that. Again, having that awareness is key and so helpful, listening to those fullness cues, if you will. And it's very, very helpful to making sure you're not overeating. And I think it's always fun. It's a fun game I like to play with my patients. Like, okay, I want you to time yourself eating dinner, and I want to see how long it takes you. And, I've had people come back with like, it takes me a minute. It takes me 2 minutes. I had one person say 45 seconds. Like, what are you doing? You just like holding it up and just shoving it in your mouth? By extending that time frame, and I usually tell people try to take 10 to 15 minutes to eat their dinner, can really be helpful on cutting back on how much they're eating, or even preventing them going up for seconds, which helps with overeating and kind of helps with portioning too.
Yeah.
So
little things. It can even be just like putting your fork down in between each bite.
Yes.
There are little tips to kind of.
Yeah. So mindful eating is such an interesting aspect and very, very helpful, especially helping you with the practice of just being aware and helping you with awareness of your body and what your body's trying to tell you.
Another benefit, thanks to one of my clients, he found that when he actually had to take longer to eat his meal, he had to fill that time, right? Kind of break it up, not struggle. And so he was talking to his family, and his wife called him out on it and was like, this is really nice. Bringing families together too.
Look at that. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh, that's so great. No, it is interesting when you take that time, and how you fill that time is also very interesting to talk with patients about too. And but it really does make a difference. I've had patients say so. I'm sure you've had patients say so, but it really does help. It really does help kind of manage that. So yeah, very interesting when it comes to mindful eating and emotional eating, and kind of where they are. Like you said, they're like on opposite ends of the spectrum, of course. But they could be very helpful in helping people attain their goals. So one thing on this podcast that we focus on is, well, many things we focus on, but the main focus is food, hydration, exercise, and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I know we focus on those areas when we talk to our patients about it. If you could only choose one of them, just one, which one would you say would be the most beneficial for people to utilize, one area to utilize to start off with their goals, and that will help them the most in achieving their goals?
You do know that's like a near impossible question. They're like,
I know it is a loaded question beyond belief. I know. I'm right there with you.
I feel like you're setting me up, because it's like the dietitian should say food, right? Like, I feel like that's what's the dietitian's supposed to say food. So like, say it, Kathleen.
Right.
So I'm going to go with sleep. It is certainly the most neglected, as I'm sure you found.
Yeah. Yes.
There's so much new research. So I don't know if everybody on here knows, but like, you and I are nerdy, and we like to dig into current research on things just for fun.
Right.
And I guess we did it a few months ago now, but learning all the new stuff on sleep, because there's so much coming out just in the last few years. Sleep deprivation, like, it's more than just, I know we always talk about like I always usually think about being exhausted or not being focused, or I tell my kids, if mama doesn't get enough sleep, I'm going to be grumpy. Right. And
yeah, I love it.
Like those are the like most common things we think about when we think about sleep deprivation, but like, it affects our hunger and satiety cues, the ghrelin and leptin hormones and their production. It reduces immune function and decreases insulin sensitivity. It affects our ability to lose fat mass, increases the loss of fat-free mass, like you name it. Like, there's so many effects to not getting enough sleep. Again, they're all intertwined, so they're all crazy important.
Right.
But I think that's the one I'm going to go with.
No, I agree with you. I think I would choose sleep as well. I think sleep is absolutely 100%. Not people don't get enough of it, and it really does. It is the foundation of all of those four topic areas. So the food, the hydration, and the exercise. Like, if you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to perform well in your exercise. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be driven to eat other foods that you probably shouldn't be eating. And
maybe even emotionally eat because you're exhausted and tired.
Yes.
Like, you need comfort. There's so many.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's very, very important that people focus on sleep. It is probably I agree hands down that is probably the one thing that they should be focusing on and starting with their health goals. If you don't get a lot of sleep or you don't get enough sleep, I believe that should be about 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep for adults. If you're not getting that, try to get as close as you can to that. I'm very aware that some people are just like, nah, it just doesn't work for me. It's not what I want. I prefer to get like 6 hours of sleep or 5 hours of sleep. I really do. Or
not even prefer. They just can't, right? Like, some people have crazy jobs.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. That is also true. Shift work, that can be very tough to try to make sure you get the amount of hours that you need to get for sleep. So I just tell people to do the best that they can, because it really is going to make the world of difference in their day the next day. And really, if you're an athlete or you're exercising hard, that's your body's time to recover. And if you're not getting sleep, it can't recover, and you're going to be potentially prone to more injuries, and you're going to also you're not going to be able to perform well. It's just simple as that. So great answer. I would it's the same way. Last kind of question for today, which is, if there was one thing. So we already talked about out of the exercise, food, sleep, and hydration. We already talked about that. But if there was one thing, just one thing someone could do that would help them start on the right foot and attain their health goals, separate from those specific areas that we talked about, what would one thing that you would recommend?
We've already mentioned it a few times, but obviously I'm a huge advocate of the power of small wins. Those small wins, they allow us to focus on, like we've mentioned before, progress, not perfection. And so when you break down your big goals into small, manageable tasks, we're able to make that steady progress. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
I have not had the chance yet to read that book, but I've had so many people recommend that to me.
So I actually was blessed to hear him speak at one point.
Oh, wow.
But he talks about his 1% rule. The premise is that if you can just be 1% better each day, just 1%, right? Which is so nominal. Small wins, they add up.
They absolutely do. Yeah, I need to read that book. I've had a lot of people tell me to read that book. It's been suggested a lot.
I know you're more a podcast guy. Feel free to listen to it on audio.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, so I think that's an excellent suggestion. I would also agree. I think that's very important. Focus on your small wins, everyone. Don't think of huge goals. I mean, have kind of a goal in sight, but then break that goal into small goals and small stepping stones to get there. And please celebrate the small wins, like Kathleen said. Celebrate them.
I love celebrating. We celebrate all the time, me and my client. We have parties.
Yes,
you gotta celebrate.
Absolutely. It's so much. It's so important. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for your time today. I've always enjoyed speaking with you. It's always great to be on the same team with you, and hopefully we'll have you on again and we'll talk about some other things. And really, it's been a pleasure and appreciate all of your insight. If you are watching the show and you would like to learn more information about MJD Nutrition, you can go ahead and look in the show notes below. And if you also are looking for a dietitian, you can go ahead and go to our Academy's website. I'll put a link down below to help you if you can't find someone in your area. Or need to find someone in your area, and also kind of tell you if they take insurance or not. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.